Welcome to Matrescence Unfiltered, the podcast exploring what really happens to your identity, ambition, and career when you become a mother. Matrescence is the transition into motherhood, and it's one of the biggest identity shifts a woman will ever go through. Yet, when it comes to our careers, it's still barely understood. So often, motherhood gets framed as something to push through and bounce back from.
We think it's something else entirely, a capability shift, and we think it's time to name it and to talk about it properly. I'm Rose, coach, consultant, and researcher completing a master's in organisational psychology.
And I'm Bianca, a chief marketing officer, pregnant, and living this experience in real time. Each episode, we take one belief about motherhood and work that doesn't hold up under scrutiny and break it down properly.
Using research, lived experience, and honest conversations about what sustainable high performance actually looks like when your identity is shifting.
Welcome to Matrescence Unfiltered. We're really glad you're here.
Hello, so we're back for part 2. Last episode, we laid out the cost, the penalty, the gaps, the price women quietly pay across their whole lives. If you missed it, go back and start there because this picks up right where we left off. I'm solo for this first bit because Bianca is deep in newborn life right now, which is exactly the season this whole show is about. Very on brand. The book we wanted to talk about for the first half of this episode is It's a Rich Man's World by the founders of Female Invest, the same women we quoted in last week's episode. And we've actually spoken about them on the podcast before. And we promise this is not paid content. We are just huge, huge fans of the work they're doing. So let me take you through the 3 chapters that stopped me in my tracks. So grab a cup of tea and let's get into it. So chapter 1, Married Men Are the Real Gold Diggers. Oof, what a brilliant title. And here is the argument. The biggest financial decision you will ever make is not your job. It's not your mortgage. It's not your pension. It is who you will marry. And for women, that decision carries hidden costs. We've all heard the word gold digger thrown mainly at women. A woman marries up and everyone assumes she's after money. But if you flip it, look at what a man actually gains when he marries a woman. He gains someone to run the home, to raise the children, to carry the mental load, and hold his whole life together, all of it unpaid. That invisible labour is exactly what allows him to work longer, to travel for work, to chase promotions, to grow his earnings. He has a wife at home, and most women never get that. And the data on this is absolutely brutal. And I wanted to call this out as part of this conversation. Women do more housework than men, even when their male partner is unemployed, even when he has the time. And when it comes to money decisions, a lot of married women step back because they assume their husband knows more. He usually doesn't. He's just more confident. And we spoke in last week's episode about women who are getting the raw deal of the 50-50 equation. Looking at what happens when things go wrong, men are more likely to leave a partner who gets seriously ill. So just let that sit for a second. And when a marriage ends, women walk away with far less. Divorced women retire with a fraction of their ex-husband's pension. The financial hit of divorce lands on her and not on him. And here is the part that really got me. Same-sex couples share the load far more equally. So this isn't about biology. It's about the roles we quietly accept inside a heterosexual marriage. So when the book says that married men are the real gold diggers, it isn't being controversial for the sake of it. It's accurate. And the person getting the biggest financial windfall from their marriage, historically, is him. None of this means don't get married. It means just go in with your eyes open, know the deal, know what you're agreeing to, know who you're marrying, because it is a deal, whether you name it as that or not. Okay, so then chapter 2 is about health is wealth. And I really wanted to call this chapter out because it's so important. This one is a bit heavier. So most people know that women live statistically longer than men. What we don't talk about is that women live those extra years in worse health, a longer life in poorer health. That's the trade. And part of this reason is that women's health has been ignored for decades, under-researched, underfunded. Women get diagnosed later than men for the same conditions. our pain is taken less seriously. The whole system was built around the male body, and women have always been an afterthought. So even conditions that affect women more severely, for example, chronic pain, which affects 70% of women, the research and the tests are done on around 80% of men or male animals. So we're not even being considered in the research of it. We are truly an afterthought. Now, if you follow what that does to money, poor health shortens your career. It lowers your lifetime earnings. It shrinks your pension. And it hits hardest in midlife. So right at the point when you're most experienced and most likely to be earning more money. Your body starts asking for support at the exact moment your career could literally be peaking. And then if you add age, now this is a figure that truly stopped me. So around 80% of women over 75 are living on their own. Now, this is either because they are widowed, they've lost a husband or partner, or they're divorced. So picture where that leaves a woman in her late 70s. She's more likely to be alone, she's more likely to be in poor health, and she's more likely to be financially stretched because she's a woman and the pension gap has followed her the whole way through. That's three things stacking up at once. Female, alone, and unwell, and under-resourced for all of it. But this is a bit that made me genuinely angry, but in a useful way, I think, because none of it is bad luck, it's design. And we underinvest in women's health. We underpay women across their whole careers. And then we act surprised when older women end up poorer, sicker, and on their own. So the saying health is wealth is not a wellness slogan, it is literal. Your health is tied to your earning power, your pension, and your independence in old age. Protect one, and you get to protect the others. Now, the third chapter I wanted to talk about is motherhood and money. And this one is the closest to home because it's the whole reason we made this episode. The book calls it what it is. Becoming a mother has a price, and women pay almost all of it. The earnings drop the moment you have a child. The career slows. The pension shrinks. And then here is the sting. Men often get the opposite. And we've spoken about this before on the podcast about the daddy bonus. So a man becomes a father and his earnings can go up. Exactly the same life event, but opposite result. Now, the pattern is clear once it's laid out. Childcare is so expensive, it often prices women out of jobs they trained for years for. Maternity pay is appalling. It absolutely drops off a cliff. And then unpaid work at home, the cooking, the logistics, the mental load, all of it lands on her. And none of it shows up in any economic figure. It's work, but it's work that nobody is paying for. What I love about how they frame it is that they refuse to call it a choice. When a woman goes part-time or steps back after a baby, we say she chose it. We couldn't disagree with that more. And actually in this episode, we're going to be retiring the term lifestyle choice. Because if you look at the math she was handed, childcare costs more than her salary. A workplace that won't be flexible, a partner whose career is quietly protected whilst hers is written off, that is not a free choice. That is not a lifestyle choice. That is a response to a broken system. And it compounds. A few years part-time doesn't mean just less money now, and we've spoken about this before. It means smaller pensions contributions, less invested, less time for it to grow, for it to compound. And the gap doesn't close when the kids grow up. It follows her into retirement. And this is exactly what we've been saying on this podcast from day one. Motherhood is not the thing that makes women less capable. The conditions around motherhood are what hold her back. Change the conditions and this penalty will start to disappear. So those are three key chapters that I wanted to discuss. I highly recommend the book. I think it just made the Sunday Times bestseller list. So I wanted to cover marriage, health, and motherhood. So three of the biggest moments in a woman's life. So here's the thing. None of this has to stay fixed. Once you can see the deal you've been handed, you can start to change it. So that's what we're going to do now. Bianca and I are going to get into some practicalities, the accounts we actually use, talk more about pensions because we are on a mission to make pensions sexy. They might just be the most powerful tool that you've got. The tax-free childcare most parents never claim, and where to start if you've got a spare £10 and no idea what to do with it. So let's get into it.
I haven't heard many conversations about
investment structures for women in the UK. So I'm going to share a little bit about mine. I use Hargreaves Lansdown, where I have a self-invested pension. So after every job that I've had, I consolidate the pension from that job and I put it into this one pot so I can have more management. Make sure that when you're looking at pensions, look into the fees you're being charged
Mm.
by keeping it in your original employer's pension plan. So I have that in Hargreaves Lansdown. I have a stocks and shares ISA that I try and top up when I can. But again, if I need the money, if you need to pull out of it, you can. So that gives you, sometimes people feel like they have no autonomy or that they're going to have to commit for 5, 10 years. And, it's such a precarious time. Like we don't know what's going to happen job wise. So that helps me. Then I have a cash ISA, and that's my structure on Hargreaves Lansdown to see like what is my actual net worth at any given moment in one screen. And the really good thing about Hargreaves Lansdown, this isn't sponsored, I promise, you can pick certain funds and track them over time. You feel like you're in control. And the best way of learning anything is by doing. So try and cut out the middleman where you can and educate, educate, educate. But the tip that I always give to friends is actually if you're starting out for the very first time and you have money that you just want to try a few funds with, like, for example, I personally, this is personal preference, have a fossil fuel free fund that I
Mm.
invest in. And it's performed really well for me. I'm happy to give the details of exactly what it is. And over the last 18 months, I've had a really, really good return. But I also have invested in gold. I've looked at real estate. I've done small amounts of money. And where I started was with £1,000. I went on to not Hargreaves Lansdown because I found the interface confusing, as you say, but actually on Trading 212.
Mm.
And I used my test £1,000, which I was fortunate to have as money, not to lose, but just to see and play with. And I used that as my first kind of guinea pig experimentation of investment to build my confidence. So I always say to friends, pick the interface that's most intuitive to you. For me, Trading 212, the app, has been really, really useful. What Go into a few different funds, like put maybe £100 in gold, put £100 in government bonds, £100 in real estate, and it could be a fossil fuel free index or just a broader index fund, and then just track it for a bit. See how it feels. And you could start with £100. You could start with £10 in each of those pots, for good diversification. That's the key point. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, especially not now, but just to build your confidence. And I have this conversation with my friends and I say, these are the funds that I'm in. And I'll share screenshots and I'll be really open and honest and be like, this is where my returns have come in. But you need to build that financial muscle and literacy for yourself. The only way that you're going to do that really successfully is by doing it and going on there and looking each day and saying, okay, gold is down. Why is gold down? And then what you'll find over time is that your confidence is built. You're linking real world events to what's going on, looking at with a long-term view. And then once you've built that up, you can start saying, okay, maybe I do feel more confident to move to like a Hargreaves Lansdown or invest more. But start small, start with diversification, talk to your friends about what they're doing. It's not taboo. Knowledge is power. But I wanted to share that because that's really worked for me. And as a starting point, I always say pick the easiest interface, diversify, start small, get to know the language, get to see that if you really need to, you can sell at any point, and build your confidence from there.
My approach is similar, but also a little bit different. So I have a ISA, a stocks and shares ISA that I
Yes.
put a amount of money, not a lot, but I put a set amount of money into each month. So that builds up over the course of the year. And that's great. It's almost like money I don't even think about. I put it away. I also have some money in commodities. So just for context, especially in a geopolitically turbulent time that we're in right now, commodities tend to stay up, whereas the stock market tends to go down. That's the most simplest way I can think of saying it. I also, for companies that I've had shares in from working with them, that is something that I keep an eye on. But what my kind of biggest ethos is when it comes to this is I invest my money where I spend my money. So right now, I am obsessed with Korean skincare. And I know that that market is going to continue to grow, especially in the UK, especially as they start to go into like Sephora and Ulta in the US. So that is where I'm investing my money right now because I know that that is a growing market and I know that that's not going anywhere because us millennial women are obsessed with skincare. So I think just framing it as well as like investing your money where you're spending your money. That is an area that's worked for me. And
Yes.
then I actually don't check mine very regularly. I almost
No.
put it away and I forget about it. And it's money that I can spare. And like I said, I don't invest loads. I don't have like thousands of pounds each month to look at. It might be £50 here, £20 there. And if I have a little bit extra than I do. Right now I'm saving for a trip, so I'm not investing much money because I need the cash. But I think it's really important to just put a little bit away, little and often, let it compound over time through ISAs. ISAs is a great way to save as well because it's tax free. And yeah, my biggest thing for me has been investing my money where I spend my money because I know I'm not the only person spending money there. So it's a smart place to invest.
I love that. One of the best pieces of advice I ever heard about buying a designer bag is invest in the brand before you get the bag. So, example, Chanel. The classic double flap Chanel bag is
Hmm.
up annually 10 to 12% year on year, which is crazy returns, by the way. Before you buy the bag, invest in the stock. You are an example of a supply and demand piece there. So I love that advice. I think it's really, really useful. What platforms can you recommend for anyone?
So I have a little bit of a mix. I do a little bit on Revolut because I'm a Revolut fan and I have since I work with them I have an account and they do commodities, they do different EFTs and types of accounts. So you could on Revolut they have one and I have invested some money in this is they have a Korea one in general and then you can invest in that Korean EFT. So, and then you can also do green funds. Same with your pension, like you can put it into a higher risk.
When I started out, I didn't even know what platforms people use. I had no
No.
idea.
I'll give you a very quick story of how I started investing, and it's a very simple story. I read Girls Just Want to Have Funds. I essentially understood what an EFT was. I understood the different risks and green funds and that sort of stuff. Also investing, you can invest in like a legitimate investment is things like jewelry and watches and handbags. So it doesn't have to be something that it feels intimidating like a investment platform. But honestly, most of my investments I do through Revolut because I have an account with them. I trust them and they do commodities, they do EFTs, they do different funds. And you can play around with just like putting £10 on something if you wanted. You don't have to go big with them. And I know some other platforms do. I've also used Hargreaves Lansdown, and I also have used Moneybox, and I think they're really simple, and I like their user
Moneybox,
interface as well.
yes.
I recommend if you're interested in investing, which you should be, just start doing one or two small things. There's someone called Maggie Sellers Room as well, who is of Hot Smart Rich,
Mm.
which is one of my favorite podcasts, and she talks. She has her own kind of investing structure as well. So I would just recommend people to find something that they feel comfortable with and that suits them and doesn't feel intimidating because I think that is the key.
I love that advice. And of course, we're not financial advisors. We're just sharing
No.
things that have
Yes.
worked for us and places to start. What else can people be doing in the UK? What else can mothers to be, what else can we be thinking about?
Okay. I feel like I always bang on about pensions, but I'm going to just share some actual practical tips that you can use. So, firstly, is pensions. So, if
Pensions
you're
are
a
sexy. We need to make
making we'll
pensions
rebrand pensions as
sexier.
sexy. So, if you're a higher rate taxpayer and you increase your pension contribution, you get 40% tax relief rather than 20%. This is effectively your employer taking money that would have gone straight to HMRC and putting it into your pension so you can access that later in life. On maternity leave, your employer is still required to pay your pension contributions based on your normal salary in some schemes, so not to reduce your MAT pay. Worth checking though in your contract. And even small additional contributions in your 30s compound significantly by retirement. The earlier the better, and it's never too late to start. What I would
Yes.
say is something I've always done is, when you sign up for your pension when you start your new job,
Yeah.
you get an option whether you do whatever percentage. I always pay the highest percentage. And then I'm never, when I get my salary, I don't ever know it without that higher percentage taken out. So that's kind of another little tip for me. Yeah, that's me banging the pensions drum once again. So the next thing you can practically do is around tax-free childcare. So this scheme is quite underused. So it's every £8 you pay into a tax-free childcare account, the government adds £2 up to £2,000 per year per child. You can use it for nursery, childminders, after-school clubs, holiday clubs. A lot of working parents don't actually know that this exists or do not get around to setting it up. So it's worth doing before childcare costs start.
I had no idea about this. That is something that I've just learned today. I was today years old when I learned about this tax-free childcare account. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to be doing some research.
Excellent. And then we've spoken about this a little bit, but the other practical thing is around compound interest. So this is, as we've just discussed, the conversation that most women are not having. Compound interest is the principle that your returns generate their own returns over time. So the earlier you start, the more powerful it becomes. So £100 a month invested in your 30s grows substantially different to £100 a month invested in your 40s. It's an exponential gap. Also, another thing, if you are a mortgage payer, to rather than paying your mortgage monthly, if you pay it weekly, your interest goes down quicker over time. I think you have to check on your mortgage contract agreement whether you can pay weekly payments. But if you pay that monthly amount every single week, your interest comes down over time because you're paying it off quicker. It can save you tens of £1,000s. Salary sacrifice. And I know, and also from working in HR and understanding the effort that goes into reward systems and benefits, I feel like childcare and salary sacrifice is always a little bit of a grey area. But some employers still offer this and it can reduce your taxable income. So this is worth noting if your employer offers it, especially for nursery costs. And if you're navigating return to work negotiations, childcare support as a benefit is worth putting on the table. So I would recommend that as well.
So much good advice there. Thank you very much for sharing. And I think there's some good practical takeaways that I feel like we can summarize as well on our social channels
Yes.
because, yeah, there's a lot of good stuff there. And you've definitely got me thinking and feeling a little bit more optimistic about what I can do. And also, I'll be honest, a bit outraged about how unpublicized a lot of this stuff is.
Mm.
So, again, we're in a system that doesn't seem to want us to have access to information. So, us sharing it as women with our friends in conversations like this is key.
It does give me hope, and I do think it's really good to share this information. But one thing I do want to reflect on is just how expensive it is to be a woman. And I say this, so this morning I was out and about. I'm going on holiday next week, which I'm very excited about. And I was getting my nails done and my hair cut because I needed both done. It was almost a maintenance thing. And not to me, but on two separate occasions, this morning only, I heard someone say, how expensive it is to be a woman. This is the cost to be a woman. First, it was someone discussing how much she paid for her hair. And then the next, it was how much someone had paid to have her nails done, which I think was like £90 for a Russian manicure or something, which is so expensive. And it's not even just the expense of it. Like, I actually stopped getting my nails done last year, not because of the money, but because of the time. Like, I do not have an hour and a half to sit there and get my nails done every 4 weeks. Like, it is a lot, 3 to 4 weeks. Like, it's a lot of time. So I don't think anyone actually talks about the cost in total. And it's something called the pink tax. Have you heard of this?
Yes, I have. And the time part of it is, oh, it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. Talk to me about the pink tax.
Okay, so it's essentially the premium price that women pay for products and services that are for women. So collectively in the UK, it costs women £4.34 billion a year for things like personal care, clothing items. And with that as well, what I want to point out is over the course of your lifetime, So I think the average menstrual cycle is 38 years. It costs £20,000, well, £20,359 essentially to have a period. And this covers things like obviously sanitary products, but painkillers, new underwear, bedding, hot water bottles. So it is so expensive to be a woman, not just financially, but also from a time perspective. So I just thought it would be worth noting that. And when we're talking about this additional expense in the context of work, there's also a cost that doesn't appear really in any data about the cost of a professional appearance. So if you think about a man going into work, he could probably go to the barbers and get his hair cut for less than £20 and be in a plain suit and be considered professional. Whereas a woman, it's so much more complex than that. And the expectations around hair, nails, makeup, clothing, heels often as well. It's not vanity, it's like career infrastructure. So it's just this expectation of how a woman should appear at work to look professional. So that also is expensive as well.
Not to mention when you're pregnant and maternity fashion and trying to still look professional while the majority of your clothes no longer fit you. It doesn't feel great. So we have a lot to contend with. And I think, you know what? Like, looking at this episode overall, the numbers that we're sharing, they're not meant to be overwhelming, are they? They're
No.
meant to be seen, because our entire point here is that you cannot make informed decisions about your career, pension, savings, or the return to work if nobody has put like the full picture in front of you.
And I think as well, the financial cost of motherhood is real. It is documented. And the burden is largely on women individually, and the economy benefits collectively. I think knowing that is the start of being able to do something about it.
Knowledge is power. So, what do we want to retire? What term are we thinking from? I feel like there's a lot to retire and rebrand here. What do you think?
I think the biggest one for this episode is to retire lifestyle choice.
Lifestyle choice. Yes. Again, with everything to do with us women, how trivializing is that? This idea that a lifestyle choice is used to describe women reducing their hours, leaving work after children, it frames this structural economic reality as personal preference. And it lets the system, employers, policy, governments completely off the hook. It just makes me so mad.
Yeah, and the data tells us that it's not a choice, it's a consequence. So lifestyle choice is retired.
We
Goodbye.
need to rethink it. Good riddance.
Good
And
riddance.
I would like to end on a note from Feminomics. And we talked about the internalization of a lot of this. And I feel like this passage really summarizes it beautifully. So, when you're home with your baby, I urge you to keep your eye on the prize, your total lifetime utility, of which your baby's human capital is a part of which career accomplishments can be a piece, but where everything has its own place. It bears repeating here again. Your job is a technology to convert your time into money. It helps me sometimes to remember the absurdity. All the career stuff, all the jobs, all the glass skyscrapers, all were built from our evolutionary drive as a species to accumulate resources in order to provide. And now, sometimes we're so busy accumulating these resources that those of us who become parents feel like we're doing something wrong by fulfilling these evolutionary desires. If you experience a panicky feeling rising inside about how you're not doing enough or what other people are achieving while you're on leave, hold your child close, breathe deeply, and say, "This is life."
I love that.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that. Perfect note to end on.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for all of the amazing practical advice that you've given us. I feel empowered. I feel like I have some research to do. And I feel like I have that little bit more autonomy as I continue my financial planning. So thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today.
If you've taken something from this episode, we'd be so grateful if you shared it with a friend.
We'd also love to hear from you. Find us on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. And please share your questions, comments, and experiences. This is a conversation we want to build together.
Until next time.